has already committed to. And then later on in the show, we're going to hear from Rashida Phillips, who is the counsel at Community Legal Services, who leads their housing unit, to talk about the implications of the extension of the moratorium on evictions that just took place at the federal level. Many of you have probably seen in the national news the Congresswoman Cori Bush from St. Louis, Missouri, who staged a sleep-in on the steps of the Capitol to bring attention to the plight of people who are currently houseless and people who are at threat of eviction. And that raised national attention and prompted some movement to extend the moratorium on evictions, which was due to expire. So we're going to hear about the local implications of that. And I think that's at the 6 o'clock hour. But of course, each week we welcome you as our primary guest. And to join in the conversation, you can call 215-634-8065 or 1-866-361-0900. You can listen online at wordradio.com, and we're also live on Facebook at onWURD and at on Twitch TV, twitch.tv, also a streaming service where you can catch us. So, glad to be with you all this Friday. I want to give a quick update. Last week we had the director of Mr. Soul, the movie, Melissa Hayslip. And the movie, as many of you regular listeners might recall, it's a documentary about the show Soul that was on public television from 1968 to 1973 and featured a lot of the celebrated, what have become celebrated cultural figures, musicians, artists, political thinkers, authors, etc. And that was going to be taken up on HBO Max starting, I believe, last Sunday. I went to look for it because I wanted to watch it again, and I did not see it there. So let me, if you were able to catch it on HBO Max, why don't you call in and let me know, because I had trouble finding it, and I'm wondering if anybody else had the same issue. Speaking of films, there's also Black Star Film Festival is happening right now, and I know that WURD is a sponsor of Black Star, and Black Star is, of course, the annual film festival that takes place here in Philadelphia, focusing on African American and indigenous cinema from around the world. And there are a number of great films lined up. So I'm going to, at the end of the show, give you my picks for Black Star. There's a couple more days of Black Star. I think Saturday and Sunday. Sunday, I think, is the last day. So be sure to check it out. There's some live screenings at the Mann Center, as well as on the Parkway by Eakins Oval. But there's also a lot of stuff that you can catch streaming online, if that is more preferable to you. So I urge you to check it out. One of the things, in addition, that I want to talk about tonight is COVID in Philadelphia County. Currently, 45%, I believe, of Philadelphia County residents are fully vaccinated. 61% have gotten their first dose. And the recent assessment by the CDC and guidance by the CDC, based on the proliferation of the Delta variant, which, as we all know, is it's like 10 times more contagious. Their recommendation is now that everyone, regardless of whether you've been vaccinated or unvaccinated, if you're unvaccinated, should be wearing masks indoors. Breakthrough cases in the fully vaccinated are rare, but can happen. And they're much more likely with the Delta variant, and people who are vaccinated can be infected and pass it on to others. So I want to hear your take on the move by some restaurants and some states and some governments to require masking or require even vaccinations. I know some businesses are moving to do that, to require vaccinations or regular testing of their employees. I'd love to hear your take on that tonight. But look, we're up on our break already. And when we come back on the other side of the break, we will be joined by Council Member Jamie Gauthier to talk about the mayor's work or plan to confront gun violence and whether it is enough. You're listening to Solutions. We'll be right back.
Black Broads Abroad is a new show hosted by yours truly, Felina Jean. I've been an expat for over a decade, living across 4 continents, 6 countries, with travel to over 40 places in between. My show will feature spotlight interviews of compelling Black women who have also said peace out to the divided states and are thriving abroad. From Iceland to Istanbul, Madagascar to Mogadishu, and a host of other countries. Tune in every second Sunday of the month from 5 to 6 p.m.
Thinking about retirement? Make sure a My Social Security account is a part of your plan. A My Social Security account gives you secure access to your personal earnings history and benefit status. You can find out if you're eligible to receive benefits, compare retirement benefit estimates at different ages or dates, view spousal benefit estimates, and more. Plan for your future. Open a My Social Security account at ssa.gov/myaccount. Social Security, securing today and tomorrow.
Produced at U.S. taxpayer expense.
This is not a fad for us.
We will not resume our regular programming when things die down. We're not black to help our bottom line or because it's politically correct. We're not joining a fight. This has been our fight, our message, our people. Black lives have always mattered here. We are
Undeniably,
indefatigably, unapologetically, permanently Black Talk Media.
WURD.
Now, a traffic update
On WURD Radio.
Good afternoon. Watch for an accident on City Avenue. Bad spot for a crash here. City Avenue southbound at Belmont Avenue, right by the Chili's. We've got delays at a crawl back to Presidential Boulevard. Elsewhere, some volume on the Blue Route northbound between McDade Boulevard and Media Swarthmore. Actually, delays go back to 95. It's an earlier accident just cleared out of the way. Schuylkill eastbound heavy, Gulf Mills to Belmont, also the Boulevard to the Vine. We back up westbound University Avenue to Girard and City Avenue out to Belmont. Vine Expressway heavy, eastbound 76 to 95. A crash in New Jersey, 73 northbound between Church Road and the Jersey Turnpike, blocking the left lane. Report brought to you by ExpressPros.com. Looking for a job? Contact Express Employment Professionals and be part of their national hiring event. With one application, Express connects you with multiple employers and never charges a fee. Go to ExpressPros.com, find your nearest office, and call Express today. And for more traffic information, log on to SIGAlert.com. I'm Jason Lee with your Philadelphia area traffic.
You're listening to Solutions exclusively on WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD.
Welcome to Solutions on WURD with your host, Amati Braxton. Joining me now is Councilmember Jamie Gauthier of the 3rd District of Philadelphia. And welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Amati.
Thank you for joining. So I saw with interest your the news about the letter that you recently co-signed or co-authored with Rebecca Reinhardt, our city comptroller, to Mayor Kenney, calling on him to do more about the gun violence issue plaguing our neighborhoods. And so I'd love to hear what prompted you to write the letter in the first place.
Well, I've been advocating around this issue, since I entered office in the beginning of 2020. And the reason for my advocacy is because the district that I represent is seeing so much of the violence, and the people that I represent, they're being inundated in the places that they live and don't feel safe. And so I feel like it's my responsibility to make this a bigger priority for the city. I started my advocacy around asking the mayor to declare a citywide emergency around gun violence, so that we could devote more resources towards this issue, and specifically towards prevention and intervention and the types of programs and services and supports that could stop people from picking up guns in the first place. After about a year, the mayor formally denied, he formally stated that he would not declare an emergency, even though we had done so with opioids, even though, I'd seen us act in an emergency way with the COVID pandemic. He declined, doing that. And so the letter that I sent to him that was crafted by myself and the controller was a way of saying, if you don't want to declare the emergency, you don't want to name it an emergency, fine. But we do have to have a response that looks like, that's addressing this like the emergency that it is. Anytime that you have, we're halfway through the year, over 300 homicides, over 1,300 shootings, and primarily this is happening to Black and brown people in Philadelphia. And when you have those kinds of numbers, it's time to get in motion and treat it like the crisis that it is. So that was the purpose of the letter. And it really laid out a detailed plan for how we could have a better emergency response to the epidemic of gun violence in our neighborhoods.
So let me pause you right there. I want to just ask you, so what does declaring it an emergency officially do? Does that represent a certain kind of policy status or something, or is it just kind of more on the symbolic level, or does it actually come with more resources and things that the administration is bound to do because something has been declared an emergency?
It could. There is a legal state of an emergency that could be declared that unlocks funding, that allows operating agencies to operate in a faster way. I never asked the mayor for that. I asked him to declare a citywide emergency. And for me, that would be not only a statement that the administration sees gun violence as a crisis, but it would be a way to craft an emergency response that could be effective. And so in my mind, I wanted to see every city operating agency at the table on this every day and targeting their resources and their services towards the neighborhoods that are most experiencing this violence. In my mind, I wanted to see us use more of the city's resources towards programs, jobs programs, and trauma programs, and other interventions that could stop the violence that we're seeing in our neighborhoods. I thought we should be scouring the nation for evidence-based approaches that have worked to alleviate gun violence in other places and could work here in Philadelphia. And I also thought that the mayor could have used a citywide emergency as a rallying call for the private sector. We have big businesses here, we have private institutions here that can all be coming to the table with us in a different and better way. And so there were a number of things that could have gone into the declaration of an emergency. And in fact, I crafted my original resolution around the opioid emergency that was declared a few years ago. And if that was an emergency, I don't see why this wouldn't be one. And so it was not only a statement or something symbolic, it was something that could have been backed up by an emergency response and an emergency plan of action, which is the important part. And I think the people in our neighborhoods deserve that in this moment.
So it sounds like you feel that the mayor has not done enough. I mean, I know just from my perspective as not an expert in this area of what to do to intervene in gun violence, but somebody who reads about best practices and stuff a lot. I mean, my sense is that there are things going on, but it's not fully clear to the public what they are. There seems to be like not a clear explanation of what's happening. There's not a lot of transparency in terms of, just from my vantage point, it's not a lot of transparency in terms of the array of things that are happening so that we can really get a sense that the interventions and the initiatives that the mayor's office is prioritizing are really, the things that should be happening, and that they're kind of multi-leveled and hitting it from all angles. It's just unclear to me what all is happening.
It's not just your vantage point. I began going in 2020 and have continued to the scenes of violence in my district, and people in neighborhoods feel like they also don't understand what the city is doing to keep them safe and what the city is doing to really stop gun violence here. And so it's not just your vantage point. I think it's the vantage point of a number of Philadelphians. And I'm not saying that the administration is doing nothing. That would be a lie, right? They do have several strategies that really are derived from the Roadmap for Safer Communities, which they developed a few years ago, that they're employing. But the work that's happening has not been enough to meet the level of violence that we're seeing. And so a part of what the controller and I were pushing the mayor and his team to do was to devote much more of the city's resources and efforts to the top 14 zip codes that are experiencing violence consistently. Every agency in the city should have a role in this emergency response. Parks and Recreation should be working within those zip codes to extend hours and programming and make sure that we have supportive resources at our rec centers. The Department of Behavioral Health should be working to ensure that trauma services are on the scene right when there's a shooting to help people heal and to stop retaliatory shootings or to help stop retaliatory shootings. We should have credible messengers that can talk to and mentor young people and who have the ability to get between some of these conflicts before they turn to shootings. City Council put $5.6 million into the Commerce Department's budget for FY22. We need that money to hit the street immediately for job programming for the people that are most likely to shoot and be shot. And so I think it's, you're talking about transparency, and yes, we need much more transparency. Philadelphians should not be in the dark on this issue, but we also need a ramp up of efforts that meets the condition and what we're seeing out in our streets.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. One of the critical issues is guns coming into the community from outside of the community. Maybe they're being resold inside the community, but what can be done from your perspective to kind of cut off the source of the violence there, number one. And then my second question is, we had Kempis Songster, who's part of this new program, a restorative healing program, restorative justice program for adolescents at YAS that is in partnership with the DA's office. And he is talking about their program is about using a healing circle model, I would call it, to have the perpetrator of a crime, an adolescent, and their crime victim come together and for the young person who perpetrated the crime to take some accountability for what they've done, and for the victim to share the impact, but to talk about the impact on them and then come up with a joint solution together. And part of what we discussed in that interview was just the compounded trauma that a lot of the people who are perpetrating the crimes are dealing with, which is causing them to go out and act out in these ways. And because it's not even, according to the district attorney, it's not even really necessarily all about like drug turf anymore or anything. It's like petty retaliatory insults over social media. So, okay, I just spoke a lot. But my first question again is like, what to do about cutting off the guns being supplied to potential shooters? And then second, how do we deal with support for people who are traumatized and then traumatizing others through violence? And, I don't expect you to have the full solution, but I just would love your perspective because these are complex issues.
Sure, absolutely. We need less guns on the streets. The flow of guns into Philadelphia and the fact that guns are getting in the hands of very young people has been a disastrous mix for us. And so we should continue to try to work on policies that will decrease the guns that are in our communities. Philadelphia is preempted by the state in developing its own gun laws, and we're actually City Council launched, a lawsuit against the state of Pennsylvania, so that we could have control over our own gun laws. But that's going to play out over a long time. We need the cooperation of the state and the federal government to have better gun control that will lessen the supply of guns on our streets. But that doesn't mean that we can give up on our local strategy. As a city, we have the responsibility to use the resources that are at our disposal to stop violence in our communities. At the same time that we're fighting these battles around more effective gun control, right? And so, locally, we need to look at other measures. I read an op-ed in the paper a couple weeks ago by Dr. Wilson, who lives in my district, about how we can have more expansive gun buybacks, right? That wouldn't give maybe $100 for the return of a gun, but might give $1,000. And that would help us get some of the more high-powered weapons that we're seeing off of the streets. So we should absolutely be looking into that. And we have to look at other means too. I think that in this moment, we should be dramatically expanding street outreach. I know for a fact that a lot of the violence we're seeing in West and Southwest Philadelphia is over these petty beefs that you're mentioning, whether they be about drugs or whether they be about some other issue that started on social media or in the streets. We need to pay folks to be out in our neighborhoods, talking to young people, helping them to work through conflicts in a better way before they turn into gun violence. We need to work with reputable community organizations who can play that role as well. That can be an effective strategy, and it's been an effective strategy in other places across the country. And you bring up a good point around trauma. The saying is that hurt people hurt people. And so I think we have to do a better job of surrounding at-risk people with the support that they need so that we break the cycle of violence. And so we need to look for those folks who are most likely to be involved in these conflicts and connect them to counseling. When shootings happen, I think we need to be very proactive about going into neighborhoods, working with victims and co-victims to get them support so that they don't become involved in retaliatory violence. And so I say all this to say we don't have to be helpless. We do not have to be helpless in this situation. We can absolutely use the resources at our disposal as a local government to make a better and deeper impact on this issue and to keep people safe.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wonder if the vast majority of shooting victims were not Black and brown, if there would be, like, if we had this number of shootings, but they were among other communities, would there be a different response? That's what I always think about, because I think I agree with you in that this is a community emergency, and my niece who lives with me, she, 5 people she grew up with or knows over the past year have been shot, and she is impacted by that, even if she's not in direct communication with those people on a daily basis anymore. In her, in this period of her life, it makes her feel unsafe. It makes her feel paranoid and anxious walking down the street. And I've talked about on this show, like, for every shooting victim, whether they were killed or not, their immediate family, and then the circle around their immediate family and their neighborhood, and all of the extended family and the extended community and network of people connected to that person are all impacted. And so, if we've had, I think, 3,200 shooting victims in the past year or so?
1,300 since January, but many more, over 2,000 from 2020.
Okay. Yeah. So if we have that, and we multiply that at a minimum, at a conservative by 20, that's how many people are being impacted by what's going on. And so it really is an emergency situation.
Yeah, I think you're right to question if our response would be tepid if these were white people who couldn't sit on their porches, couldn't go to their rec centers, couldn't walk to and from work without a fear of being shot. I believe that. I believe that this is a racial justice issue. Anytime when Black and brown people just cannot live in peace where they live, right? And have to be inundated with shootings, whether it's happening to them or their families directly or to their community members. That's a racial justice issue. And I think that our city, if we say that Black Lives Matter, if we say that we believe in racial equity, then we have to step up in this moment and make sure that our residents are okay and that everyone, no matter what their race is, can live in a place where they feel safe and where they feel they can thrive and grow.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, thank you for continuing to push this issue with the mayor and elsewhere, and particularly on behalf of those in your district. And thanks for taking the time out on your day off to come and talk to us. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, and have a great day and weekend.
Okay, thank you. That's Council Member Jamie Gauthier of the 3rd District here in Philadelphia, and you're listening to Solutions. We'll be right back.
Now, a traffic update
on WURD Radio.
Good afternoon. Watch for an accident still out there on City Avenue. Bad spot for a crash. City Avenue southbound at Belmont Avenue. We've got traffic crawling now going back to Presidential Boulevard. Elsewhere, the Schuylkill Expressway. That's heavy eastbound Blue Route to Belmont Avenue and the Boulevard to the Vine. Westbound backs up University Avenue to Girard. We also jam up City Avenue to Belmont. On the Vine Expressway, 676. Watch for delays both ways the entire length. 95 backs up northbound Vine Expressway to Girard and the Betsy Ross Bridge to Bridge Street. And in Camden, we've got some delays. 676 southbound between the Walt Whitman Bridge and 76. Report brought to you by ExpressPros.com. Looking for a job? Contact Express Employment Professionals and be part of their national hiring event. With one application, Express connects you with multiple employers and never charges a fee. Go to ExpressPros.com, find your nearest office, and call Express today. And for more traffic information, just log on to SIGAlert.com. I'm Jason Lee with your Philadelphia area traffic.
Hey, WURD family, did you hear? It's official. The Colorectal Cancer Alliance just announced the new age for colon cancer screenings has been officially lowered to age 45 for everyone. If you are 45 or older, it's time to get screened. Go to WURDradio.com and click on the Go to Know banner to register for your free at-home screening test. Did you know colon cancer is largely preventable with on-time screening? And there's a 90% survival rate when caught early. African Americans are 20% more likely to get colon cancer and about 40% more likely to die from it than most other groups. So for the next 3 months, you can go to WURDradio.com and click on the Go to Know banner for your free at-home screening test. A screening navigator will contact you to ask a few questions and help you get screened. It's that simple. Again, just go to WURDradio.com, click on the Go to Know banner, and fill out the form to request your free at-home screening test. Go to Know today.
Kamasi Washington brings his fall tour to the Met Philly, one of only 6 dates on the East Coast. Don't miss Kamasi Washington October 20th at the Met Philly. Tickets on sale now as of July 30th. Tickets available at Ticketmaster.com.
So, what's the asking price on these houses?
You'd probably be more comfortable living somewhere else.
How long a lease is the landlord looking for?
Well, I'm sure you can afford to live here, but...
What are the schools like in this district?
Yeah, we have twins in the 5th grade.
This neighborhood isn't really for your kids. You know what I mean?
If you're Black, Latino, Asian American, or Middle Eastern, and a real estate agent or rental agent says anything like this, you know what it means. You're being discriminated against. Housing discrimination because of race, color, or national origin is against the law. If you believe you've experienced housing discrimination, contact HUD. Go to HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Fair housing. The law is on your side. A message from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
You're listening to Solutions exclusively on WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD.
Welcome back to Solutions on WURD. This is your host, Amadi Braxton. Just before the break, talking with City Council member Jamie Gauthier of the 3rd District about her recent letter co-penned with City Controller Reinhardt, critiquing, questioning, pushing the mayor to do more and to be more transparent about the ways his administration is addressing gun violence. Let's go to Maurice in Southwest. Hi, Maurice.
How you doing, Miss Monty? How you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Yeah, I'm from Miss Gautier's district, okay? And I do appreciate that she said something. But the problem I have is, yeah, you can speak it up, but you don't have answers on how to complete the mission. You just come out there, yeah, we need a state of emergency, but how are you going to handle emergency? First of all, I don't like it being called gun violence because we know there's no way we're getting rid of the guns. We already know that. So that's like an oxymoron. We're not stopping you can close every gun shop in Philadelphia. People don't even buy guns in Philadelphia. They buy it on the outskirts of Philadelphia. Yaden, Lansdowne, up my end. If the guns are $100 cheaper as soon as you cross the border. Okay? We have gun shows out there by Valley Forge and Oaks. Looks like a rock concert every time they have a gun show out there. Most of the people that speak about guns and say gun violence have never been in a gun shop before. They don't know the procedure. They just think that you go in there like a grocery store, pick out what you want and walk out. And the most important part, there is no ammunition in any of the Philadelphia stores for your gun if you do are able to pass the gun background check. So these people are talking about stuff they have no knowledge of. What we have a problem is, why are black people harming other black people? That is the problem. If they didn't have a gun, they have a knife. If they didn't have a knife, they use their car. If they didn't have a car, they will have a sharp stick. The problem with Philadelphia is the people at ground level here is not treated like human beings. You know, in Southwest Philly and West Philly, that's the only areas I can speak of. There are no public trash cans on the street. So all these people talking about the city is filthy, but the city puts no obligation to make it easier for people to get rid of their trash. You know, when the trashmen come down and pick up the trash, if something falls out their truck or they see garbage in the street, they used to get out and use their shovels and brooms. That's what's attached to the truck. They will not use it. They'll just keep riding. If it's not under 50 pounds or whatever the weight limit is, that's all they doing. They ain't doing no extra. They're just doing to specifically their job duty, but they're not. It's not like they're public servants. And these are the problems. Our city officials look at the black business districts, and guess what? They're not black anymore. They're everybody else but black Americans working those business districts, and they're not putting any money into it. They're not working with the zoning zone so people can go out there and vend and maybe be entrepreneurs. None of that is put in effect. And I watch my area around 52nd Street when I went to their salespeople meeting of people who have businesses on the block. I was the only black in there, and I didn't even own a business. So these are the problems that we're having. And these people, all they're concerned about is City Hall. When you do go to City Hall and want to view your grievances, if it's not on the bill that week, you can't speak on it. That's not part of the sunshine rule. You should be able to go to a council meeting, address any problem that you have to your council person, and they won't do it. They want to give back slaps and give rewards away, but when people come up to speak, they tell you, well, we was going to give you 3 minutes, but since we gave all these resolutions and tell everybody how great they are, you only get 2. And they constantly ringing the bell, interrupting your conversation when you're trying to talk. So, you know, I'm just saying, when they come back off of vacation, there's no reason why city council can't have meetings. If everybody got to wear a mask and they got to put up petitions, whatever have an open conference and stop this nonsense with the Zoom, and I'd like to hear your opinion on it.
Okay, you laid out a few things. I'm going to take one by one. First, in terms of the guns and gun violence and access to guns, there are state laws. There's state law that preempts the city of Philadelphia from doing any of its own legislation to control the gun flow into the city. That's part of the problem. And I think a lot of the illegal guns, a lot of the guns that are being used in these crimes are not legally purchased. So they're not going to a gun shop and getting the guns. They're buying it from somebody they know, or getting it out of the trunk of somebody's car, being sold out of the trunk of somebody's car. So, I think that the city should be aggressively suing the state to regain some control over how it governs itself and its own ability to put in place mechanisms to control guns within the city. Number one. Number two, I agree with you that there's a larger issue of dehumanization and not treating people as human beings that over time leads people to have a low sense of themselves and therefore a low sense of others. If you don't like yourself because you've been told by every institution that you're not worth anything, whether it be your school, not valuing you enough as a child to think that it should be a decent looking building and it should have good physical plant and you should have air conditioning that works and you should have water coming out of the water fountains that is not infested with lead, or that you should even have water fountains that work at all in the first place. And then you live in a community where there's trash everywhere and there's no recreation, and all of that over time sends subtle and not so subtle messages to young people about their own self-worth. And if you walk around feeling like you're not worth anything, what does that teach you about how to treat other people? So I agree with you on that. The last point related to the city council hearings and people's ability to talk and speak, I don't know exactly how it works. I trust what you're saying, but part of the issue is they do have business they have to get to. And so they can't just have everybody coming and speaking ad nauseum on every topic or on topics that aren't related to the business at hand. So I understand your frustration, but I also understand from the perspective of somebody who's trying to get business done that they actually have to get business done. So thank you, Maurice. Always enjoy your contribution to the conversation and what you think about these things, and particularly from your ground level experience. One last point you made related to Black businesses. Part of the reason why there's a push to create a public bank that would not have its profits go to private companies located elsewhere in the country or overseas, but would be controlled by the city or by the state, is that, one of the things a public bank would do, since the profit motive is not its bottom line, part of what it would do is to give low interest loans to Black business owners. Currently, 90% of Black business owners who seek credit or seek a loan from a bank gets denied. Why is that? So we need to have a bank that we actually have some control over and that is not solely motivated by the profit motive and is not solely taking a predatory orientation to the community, that will give low interest loans to Black business owners. I think that's a big thing. And also, people should be giving grants to Black business owners. And I know that there are some organizations out there that do that, but we need to allow people to have more access to the capital they need, because really access to capital and access to cash flow is one of the biggest things that a small business owner needs. And I know from my own experience as a small business owner. All right. Again, thank you, Maurice. You can join the conversation at 215-634-8065. I'm curious what you think about Councilmember Gautier and Controller Reinhardt's letter to the mayor, whether you think, in fact, that the mayor has been doing enough, has been taking the right approaches in terms of the kinds of interventions his administration is putting forth, whether you think it would be a different response, a stronger response, if there were white people being shot at the rate that people are being shot in Philadelphia right now. Maybe that question has an obvious answer. But we'd really love you to join the conversation. I want to get back to the topic on the topic of COVID, though, because this is something that we're all facing. I, as somebody with a rare lung disease, is particularly concerned, even though I'm fully vaccinated. I am concerned about even, a breakthrough infection that I could get because of the Delta variant. And I don't think the Delta variant is super prevalent right now here, but it is coming for sure. And I read an article a couple weeks ago about the 11 zip codes in Philadelphia that have low rates of vaccination. And I can read them off to you now. These zip codes in Philadelphia have the lowest vaccination rates: 19138, 19141, 19120, 19124, 19131, 19135, 19134, 19133, 19151, 19139, 19142. Okay, I read those totally out of order, but these are the zip codes with the lowest vaccine rates. And of course, those are majority Black and brown communities in the city, lower income communities. So this raises a couple of questions for me. One is, what do you think is still standing in the way of people having higher vaccination rates in those neighborhoods? And number two, should we return to mask mandates? Should employers be mandating vaccines? Again, the Biden administration is now requiring vaccination or twice weekly testing for federal employees. There's a number of employers that are moving to this kind of a model. I know that Wawa just announced and Penn State University just announced they're going back to requiring employees, and in the case of Penn State, students as well, to wear masks indoors regardless of vaccination status. And I know that New York City is requiring proof of vaccination for a number of indoor activities, including dining at restaurants. Billy Penn is now has a running list of restaurants in Philadelphia which will require proof of vaccination for indoor dining. I happen to be all for that. I think if you want to dine in, or if you want to enjoy other indoor activities and patronize businesses that to help keep them going, you should do your part to protect other people. I noticed on the list that Billy Penn had one of my favorite restaurants was listed on there. They're going to start requiring proof of vaccination when you show up. And I like that. Anyway, I'm curious to see what you think. Is that discriminating against people? Or is it a public safety measure that will benefit everyone? The other thing is, the lowest rate of vaccination in the city, and I think this is probably elsewhere around the country, is the 12 to 18-year-old category, even though they are eligible to be vaccinated now. And school is getting ready to come up in September. Kids are going to be going back to school. Students are going to be going back to college. onto campuses, and they are the lowest rate of vaccinated of everyone. So people need to get their children vaccinated in time for the school year. I'd love to know what you think. I think the idea is that having these mandates is going to encourage more people to get vaccinated, but we shall see. So look, we're up on our break. On the other side of this break, we will hear from Rashida Phillips from Community Legal Services Housing Unit to talk to us about the extension of the eviction moratorium and its implications for people here in the Philadelphia area. You're listening to Solutions with Amani Braxton. We'll be right back.
In Philly, COVID-19 vaccines are safe, free, and effective. It protects you from contracting the COVID-19 virus. Vaccines do not change your DNA or contain microchips. Caribbean people are not immune to the deadly virus without COVID-19 vaccine shots, and it does not affect your immigration status. Join us for our back-to-school COVID-19 vaccination resource fair on Saturday, August 21st from 11 to 3 p.m. at Sturgis Recreation Center in Albany. Free food, school supplies, and vaccines. Visit www.caribbeancommunityinphiladelphia.com, Facebook or Instagram page.
WURD Radio Digital Tip of the Month
with Stephanie Humphrey.
Brought to you by Comcast.
You might be enjoying the hot days of summer, but your smartphone probably isn't. Hotter temperatures can potentially damage your phone, so here are some things you can do to keep it cool. Don't leave your phone in direct sunlight or locked in a car if possible. And if you don't absolutely need it, ditch the smartphone case too. That can easily trap heat. Change the settings to lower the brightness, turn off data, put your phone in airplane mode, or try to do less high-powered activities like gaming. If you do notice your smartphone overheating, turn it off and take out the battery if you can. And don't try to cool it down by putting it in a refrigerator or freezer. Just keep your phone in a cool area for a while until it returns to room temperature. Stay cool, stay tuned to WURD for more tips, and stay connected with us at wordradio.com.
Stand with WURD Radio,
the only black-owned talk radio station in Pennsylvania.
Did you know you can join the 4WURD movement and amplify voices of the black community as a digital member for as low as $5 per month? Visit membership at wordradio.com or call 215-425-7875. We need you. Show your support. Start or renew your 4WURD membership today. This is WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD Philadelphia.
Independent black media.
You're listening to Solutions exclusively on WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD.
Welcome back to Solutions with your host, Amani Braxton. Joining us now is Rashida Phillips, who is the managing attorney for housing policy in the housing unit at Community Legal Services. And of course, those of you who regularly listen to the show have heard Rashida on talking about the issues of housing and how to protect the rights of tenants from being evicted. Hi, Rashida.
Hello. Hi, Amadi. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. Thank you so much for joining the conversation. I wanted to reach out to you, as you know, because there has been a lot of media attention on the fact that Congresswoman Cori Bush from Missouri held a sleep-in or sleep-out on the steps of the Capitol to bring attention to the fact that the eviction moratorium was about to be up, was about to expire, and there was nothing being done at the federal level about that. And it created enough attention where the federal government moved to extend it. And I'm wondering, it made me think, how does that impact the people here in Philadelphia who may be facing eviction or who are struggling with back rent? Give us some, enlighten us on what the implications are of what happened at the federal level on what's happening here in Philadelphia.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So just to give a little bit of that context, so as callers on your show may know, there was a federal moratorium in place for the past couple of months that expired on June 30th. That federal moratorium covered people who signed what's called a CDC declaration form, stating that they have been impacted by COVID and that, they're behind on their rent. And so it prevented people from being locked out of their apartments during that time. And in Philadelphia, we also had some local protections in place that also helped to protect people from being locked out. And then those protections expired, as you said, June 30th. And so what the national, kind of uprising around the eviction moratorium expiring was about, as you said, was there was some noise made, although, for advocates, right, who do this every day, in some ways it felt performative, right, but sometimes performance does help and help push things to get where they need to be. And so as a result of that, as you said, both what was happening in Congress, and then as well as national advocates and organizers and impacted people telling their stories, they decided to put the moratorium back into place until October 3rd. But there are some caveats with that. So the moratorium does not cover everywhere like it did before. It covers counties that are seeing substantial or high transmission rates of COVID. And so Philadelphia does, unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, fall into the substantial category. And so we are covered by the moratorium. But as I said, it's not a moratorium that is just automatically going to cover everyone. Unfortunately, you have to opt into that moratorium by signing that declaration form. So although Philadelphia is covered under the CDC moratorium in terms of being a county that's at substantial risk of transmission, you still are not automatically covered until you sign that CDC declaration, hand it to your landlord. If you're in the middle of an eviction, it has to go on a court record, et cetera. So there are a number of steps that people still have to take to get that protection.
How do people where would people find that document that they have to sign to opt in?
So if you're in Philadelphia, you will go on phillytenant.org. That's Philly, TENANT.org. And so we have the CDC declaration form up there. We have it in a couple of different languages. You could also, I don't know the exact specific reference, but you could Google CDC declaration also, and you can get it. It's translated into a number of different languages as well. But again, you have to sign that form. And it's also, the form has changed a little bit. So again, because the moratorium does not cover everywhere now, it does say on there that people have to certify that they're in one of those counties that is covered under the new CDC moratorium, right? So you're also certifying, which is, again, is really challenging for a lot of people in the middle. Now you got to figure out whether or not Philly is covered or wherever you're at is covered by this moratorium. But again, that declaration is going to have you certified to that. So you can find that on Philly Tenant. You can Google CDC declaration. There's a number of places you can find it. Once you fill it out and sign it, make sure you're getting it to your landlord, whether it's by text message, email, however you have to get it to that person. They need to have it before the protection kicks in.
And so the protection is basically it helps both the landlord and the tenant.
So there's a lot of nuance around it, right? So when we're talking about the moratorium, we're just talking about something that's preventing people from being evicted. It is not the rental assistance, right? So the rental assistance is a whole other process that you have to go through in order to access that rental assistance. So that's the other issue, right? And that's the other thing that's coming up as to why Congress and other folks are pushing to keep this moratorium in place so that we can spend down that billions of dollars in rental assistance that has gone out around the country, but that is not going out quickly enough, or in some places tenants aren't able to access the application or various reasons why people aren't getting that millions or billions of dollars in rental assistance. In Philadelphia, we do have, if you go on thlrentassist.org, that is where you'll find the application if you're either a landlord or a tenant, where you can apply for rental assistance. And so just to get a little bit specific, Amadi, about what this looks like in Philadelphia, again, we do have some local protections that help. We have the moratorium that's now in place that covers people who are behind on their rent if they fill out that declaration form. And then also for people who are behind on their rent, if their landlord is trying to file against them in court, or even if they haven't gotten there yet, the landlord, if you're just behind due to non-payment of rent, no other reasons, right? If you're behind on your rent, your landlord is not allowed to file in Philadelphia court until they apply for rental assistance, and then they have to wait 45 days before they're able to file in court. So that's that additional protection that we have in Philadelphia. If you're behind on your rent your landlord is not allowed to file in court until he or she applies for rental assistance and then go through that process. So we have a couple of extra protections here in Philadelphia, but there's still a bunch of people who could be evicted at this time. Because a lot of those programs only cover you if you're behind due to non-payment of rent, it's not covering people if your lease term is up or if your landlord is trying to claim that you breached your lease agreement for some reasons, right? So it's not going to cover people under those circumstances, unfortunately. And we currently don't have any protections anywhere that's going to cover folks who are in those circumstances.
What are the chief reasons that you know of that have not allowed the rental assistance money to get out as quickly as it's needed? What are the chief impediments? I mean, I know that I just moved out of my place that I was renting, and my neighbors were telling me that they had trouble getting the rental assistance because their landlord actually could not produce a deed with the landlord's name on it. So in that case, that blocked them from getting the assistance. But what are some of the other situations that are preventing the assistance from actually being utilized?
Well, that's exactly right. That kind of example is the exact reasons why people are having trouble. Most of it is due to paperwork. Most of it is due to a bunch of stringent conditions that were placed on this money, right? Because rental assistance is not something that's normally available. We've never, as a country, have had a national rental assistance program, although, right, we should for various reasons. But so there was a lot of strings attached to that money. There's a lot of documentation requirements. And if you're a person who's in a vicarious situation where your landlord's like, if you don't produce money today, I'm moving forward with trying to get you out. And so if you're not able to get that paperwork in on time, if you're not able to sign the documents on time, if you don't have your landlord's correct phone number, you're not able to contact the landlord to get their end of the application in, right? Because there's two pieces of it. There's both the piece that the tenant has to do and there's the piece that the landlord has to do. And just because the kind of country we live in, right, where things like welfare is constantly subject to threats that people are defrauding the system, this is the same kind of rhetoric that you're hearing about rental assistance. Anytime there's money flowing where, people won't have to pay that money back, there's going to be a bunch of additional requirements attached to it because, unfortunately, our government doesn't trust the people, right? And so even now there's a lot of accusations of fraud, and right, which is probably very, very rare if it is occurring, and it could be happening on either side. And so these are just some of the challenges of also just trying to administer, again, a new program that had no infrastructure anywhere, in so quick a time period during a pandemic, during a national emergency, is going to come with its challenges. So that's some of what we're seeing. The federal government is really putting out the message that, right, do what you need to do, states, to get those strings out of there so that folks can get this money as quickly as possible. So folks are being encouraged to do that. And again, in Philadelphia, one of the measures that we've taken locally is to have that eviction diversion program, and our courts stepping up to say, look, landlords can't file at this time because that money's out there, and if they're able to get that money, there's no reason to evict a tenant.
It almost gives me a headache hearing what you're saying, not because of you, but just like there's always this bureaucracy and red tape that impacts people's ability to access needed help. Yep. And if you take a step back, I mean, you're deep in this work. You have been for a long time. Ideally, big picture, future vision, what would be ideal for this kind of a program? Or maybe it's not even the need for the program, and I'm always advocating we just need to give people money directly,
right,
themselves, so that they can decide what they need to do with it. But what would you like to see as someone who is an expert in this area, and you are trying to kind of navigate within the system to create policies and practices that are better for the tenant? What ideally would you like to see?
So that's a great question. I think short of dismantling the entire system and blowing it up, just taking baby steps, I think we need to have a permanent rental assistance program, national rental assistance program of this type. And as you said, we need to get rid of the things. We need to look at the realities of the situation. Either, and you could look this two ways. Either the money should go straight to the tenant, and we trust people to make the best decisions about money and how it's going to be used. Or you have a situation where the money just goes straight to the landlord and the rent gets paid and no one needs to, even bother each other. And that still leaves people the ability to do what is best for them and with their money. Because what we saw a lot, right, is that people often are going to try to pay the rent first. And so that means that they're neglecting other things. They're, getting into deep credit card debt to try to pay off rent. They're neglecting their car payment. They're neglecting other family needs. And so when you have a strong program that's either going straight to the tenant and, again, trusting them to make the best decisions about their money, or you're just cutting the middleman out, sending it straight to the landlord, and the landlord gets paid, and then no one, needs to worry about being evicted due to poverty or due to non-payment of rent or because you fell behind 1 month, which happens to everyone. I'm privileged as a homeowner that if I fall behind on my mortgage, I get a break. I get some time. I get a couple of weeks to make it right. But as a tenant, you don't get that ability. Already your landlord is running the court, getting a record against you that's going to be a permanent record. You could pay that money the next day and you still have that record. And so we really want to cut out those kinds of circumstances that really leave people in these cycles of poverty that they can't get out. So I would love to see a permanent rental assistance program, or even better, a universal basic income program. And actually Philadelphia was going to pilot a sort of universal basic income program. It wasn't called that, but it was something very similar that gave, that would pilot and give a subset of people an income for a period of time and not put any strings around how they use that money, right? And so, but unfortunately with the pandemic, that had to be put on hold. So I would love to see us invest in those kinds of programs that, again, understand and trust people to make the best decisions. And look, right, people are paying more than half of their income or any money that they get towards their rent in most cases. People are cost burdened by rent, regardless of, what income tier or bracket you're at. Rent is too damn high. So, we need these kinds of programs that, again, are going to believe in people to make the best decisions about their money and understand that people are always going to try to pay the rent first because they want a roof over their head.
Yeah, and we need more affordable housing as well, so that the rents are lower.
That's always an issue, right? And as we say as advocates, right, we're not going to build our way out of affordable housing either. So while we need a new supply of affordable housing, we always are going to need to build new. We also have to invest in what we have. Philadelphia has an old housing stock, but we have plenty of homes, right, that are empty, abandoned, neglected, that if we had the ability to invest in those homes, we would have much more housing available for people in this city, and not just have to rely on the goodwill of developers and nonprofits to build new housing, every once in a while, or build 100 units here and there when we're talking thousands of people who need affordable housing.
Right. Let me ask you one more thing. When I talked to you, I can't remember because I have COVID brain and time is elusive. But during the time of the homeless encampment or the houseless encampment on the Parkway, which went on for quite a while during COVID, we spoke to you then, and I wanted to just know if you had an update on what has happened to the people who were inhabiting that protest space. And not that you know the details of every single person, but what has happened with that movement, that the energy that was generated through that encampment? Do you know?
So I would not be the best person to speak to that. I think some of the organizers who were directly involved in the encampment would probably be best to speak to updates. But it's my understanding that they're still continuing to try to develop the community land trust that which some of the houses that folks were occupying and wanting to see be given to the folks in the encampment, to make sure that, there's a land trust to put them into and that those houses can be fixed up. So that's my understanding of where things are, but I think it'd be probably best to connect with the folks who are directly involved at this time.
Okay.
And I know those folks have also continued to just advocate, right, because the pandemic hasn't gone away in the past year, and so they've continued to advocate in other forums for folks to have, hotels and other access to spaces so that they're not made more vulnerable to COVID as a result of living on the street.
Right. All right. Before I let you go, could you just repeat the couple of resources that you named? So there's phillytenant.org.
Yep.
And
so you want to go to phillytenant.org. Also, www.phlrentassist.org. That is where you're going to be able to apply for rental assistance. You also can call 267-443-2500. That's a hotline that will connect folks to all of the legal services organizations that are providing legal representation and advice to tenants, as well as workshops and other resources for tenants.
So that's 267.
Access the Philadelphia Eviction Diversion Program through that hotline as well.
So that's 267-443-2500?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Rashida. We really appreciate you keeping us abreast of these developments and trying to unpack what feels like a very complex process for people to be able to get assistance. So thank you so much, and thanks for your ongoing work in this area.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
You are listening to Solutions on WURD. We're up on our break, but we'll be right back.
James Schuler Boxing Gym presents Round the Way Rumbling, an amateur boxing event. Saturday, August 14th at 750 Brooklyn Street in West Philadelphia off 42nd and Lancaster Ave. First bout is at 3 p.m. Purchase tickets for $20 at jamesschulerboxing.com or call 215-399-7483. That number again is 215-399-7483. Let's get ready to rumble!
The Black Words Book Club.
WURD Radio's conversation on books that explore the African American experience through social, economic, and environmental justice issues. Tune in the second Tuesday of every month on Evening Words with Nick Taliaferro, 4 p.m. till 7 p.m. The Black Words book for September is Race Against Time, The Politics of a Darkening America by Keith Boykin. Be sure to listen live, as Nick Taliaferro will hold a contest for a giveaway book bundle that consists of 4 titles from Kensington's Defina's Authors of Color's newest release. Don't miss it, Tuesday, September 14th on Evening Words with Nick Taliaferro. Attention for WURD members. Get your copy and receive a 20% discount when you purchase at Harriet's Bookstore or Hakeem's Bookstore. For more information on the Black Words Book Club, visit wordradio.com. The Black Words Book Club is sponsored by Defina. Defina is an imprint of Kensington Publishing Corporation, America's independent publisher, concentrating on authors of color.
Want the latest in WURD swag?
Check out the shop tab on wordradio.com. Hoodies, tees, and more in a variety of colors. The shop tab on wordradio.com. Show the world that you're all about black.
Talk Media.
You're listening to Solutions exclusively on WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD.
Welcome back to Solutions on WURD. This is Amadi Braxton. And I want to just thank again Rashida Phillips, the managing attorney for the housing unit at Community Legal Services, who has really done amazing work as a policy advocate to support tenants' rights, to support tenants getting access to the rental assistance, and to advice and counseling about how they should go about getting what they need in order to keep a roof over their heads. I want to just repeat a couple of the resources that Rashida shared. One is, if you're interested in rental assistance, you can go to phlrentassist.org. That's phlrentassist.org. You can also go to phillytenant.org if you want to opt into the eviction moratorium process. And there's also a hotline where you can access legal assistance and, again, get more information about rental assistance and these other resources. And that is 267-443-2500, 267-443-2500. All right. So, I mean, and that's going to be an ongoing issue, especially if we have another surge in COVID that disrupts our lives even further than for some of us. They're already disrupted in the fall. people will continue to need that resource. And I would hope and would expect that there will be another extension of that eviction moratorium. I hope. We shall see. Look, we have a couple calls on the line. Let's go to Tyrone in North Philly.
Well, peace and blessings. How are you today, my sis?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm thanking God for everything. You know, I truly appreciate Maurice's analysis on many of the things, and every time he speaks, he speaks with such assurance that it is what it is. But in terms of this gun violence, I'm going to speak from what I see is the issue. And we seem not to really put a lot of emphasis on that aspect of it, and that is the shootings. I believe that just talking about rental assistance, when folks lose their home, it wouldn't take too much of a lot to push someone to pick up a gun and to do something they would not normally do if they wasn't losing their home. Relationships. A lot of folks, you know, into these relationships where folks are madly in love, and then when something go a little haywire, they ready to pick up the gun. And one thing about anger, when you are angry, all you want to do is shoot, and you don't care who you shoot. So with all the shootings and all the things that are going on in our community, we don't know exactly what is the issue behind all of the gun violence. And even to the point where they are saying other people are coming in, you know, doing shooting. So one of the issues that I believe that we must resolve is who is doing the shooting and why. As long as we keep having this astronomical numbers of not knowing who is doing the shooting and why, it's going to be nothing but conversation. So I always say, when I get a chance to say, my brothers and sisters, please, if you got to pick up a gun, don't do it. No matter what the issue is, no matter what the problem is, believe me, when you pick up the gun, you are angry enough to shoot anybody and anything. Now, we also have those who are going through whatever wars and disputes where they're picking up guns. Again, that's a different issue. So we just have too many things involved with shooting that we have to solve some of the shooting and capture some of those folks who are doing the shooting. So that's my take on it. And you know, my sis, if you don't mind, I really want to send a shout-out to Charles Reed's family. You know, his transitional homegoing services was today, and Charles Reed was one of the brothers, one of the true brothers in the community that was fighting tooth and nail all the things that we are talking about, particularly racism. because down in South Philly and down in Tastic, at one point, you could not even walk in the white community without being jumped. And Charles Reed was one of those individuals that put a stop to those racist, hateful individuals in South Philadelphia. So I just want to thank God for the brother and just want to send my love and my condolences to his family. So thank you, my sis, for always allowing me to share. And I hope what I said makes a little sense because, again, we got so many things that we are up against. But when our children can stand on 60th and Samson, 4 of our children, and shoot into a crowd, there's something. We got to figure out what would even get them to do that. And then after they did it, did they go home and get a good night's sleep? So that's all I would like to ask. Thank you, my sis.
Thank you, Mr. Tyrone. I think that's a great question that you ended with. What is going on in the conscience of those shooters after the fact? Do they have a conscience after the fact? Are they trying to shove that conscience down and bury it and go about their normal business? We won't know. We won't know. I think the other point you're making is that there are, we talk about underlying health conditions for COVID and, comorbidities. And I think that there are comorbidities and underlying health conditions when it comes to everything that plagues our communities, with whether it's violence or, the mental health issues. I mean, you were speaking to the underlying conditions that exist that may lead people to take these kinds of actions. And I think this is kind of what Maurice was speaking to earlier as well. Okay, look, we have Ken from West Philly on the line. Hello, Ken.
Greetings, comrades, sisters, and brothers. How have you been? It's been years.
Yes, doing well. You know what? Let me just say quick before you make your comment. I just moved and I came across a bunch of old BRC T-shirts. So you let me know if you want.
BRC T-shirts. Hey, get it to us as soon as you can. I can give you a post office box, or I can come and pick them up, whichever you like.
All right. Well, maybe you could leave your contact information with Troy before you get off the line, and then I can reach out.
Definitely, we can do that. I used to be with city government. Yeah. And city government at this point, I'm glad the behavioral operations are on that. Also, I'm noticing that the police chief came on and said that they're setting up some community centers. Well, that's one thing. That's another thing. But, the real deal is that, unfortunately, the nonprofit organizations aren't going to be able to do this. And technically, you really need to get a crew of about 300 folk out at night on the streets. There's a reason. I've been finding, and we're riding all over the city. We're just doing our little thing, And out here, we're finding all across the city that the faces on the street at night have disappeared. Totally. Became very quiet out there after a bunch of shootings went down. But the second thing was that the people that are out there are entirely different. We've been tracking this for the last 20 years, from West Philadelphia through North Philadelphia, all the way through Kensington. There's been a fifth change. This fifth change just started happening with the shooting. Anyone who's out there doing, quote, illegals, unquote, all types of things, has disappeared, quietly as it's kept, and new faces are coming into the fore. It looks as if there's been a clean out of the leadership at the top, and they're going down through the ranks to what we've called in the 60s the mules, and they're finally getting down into what the kids are doing. And that's what this is looking like. It's looking as if there's been a complete move, because let's be real. When you don't have a jobs program that's operating at 100% employment, you're going to have a country that's going to operate sort of like this, that people are doing their own thing, trying to get some subsistence. And that's what's been happening. But the clear thing is that I can't walk down the streets anymore and see the same folk out there doing those same sorts of illegal things. They've disappeared. I have no idea where they went. 3 versions of this ago, there was a fellow out in West Philadelphia, had white hair, believe it or not, brought 3 vans of people, truckloads, let them go out into the streets. It was 3 in the morning. And they took over tons of housing in West Philadelphia. And they're presently now into their 2nd and 3rd and 4th and 5th variation of who's taking over those houses that were empty. Back. People didn't have housing. So this is what happened. On top of that, you've got these folk out here who are doing, quote, the legal stuff and hiding it with the illegal stuff. We don't have bars around like we did back in the 60s, luckily. Elsewise, we'd be overloaded with this stuff. But at the moment, we really need to start getting some folk on the streets at night. City government needs to hire about 300 of them. 400 would be better. We did it before. I was in it. And we were able to move this to a stop back when people were getting killed previously in the most vicious sets of shootings around the country at that time. Every city started putting people on the streets at night. And it wasn't just for 8 hours. So what happens is that you end up being able not only to talk to the folk who are out there, we're doing this stuff, you can prevent a lot of people from getting killed, and you really need to get city government moving on this. But let's see what we can do about it. It's going to take a long-range operation. Gutierrez is interesting, and some people on this station don't think she's doing a good job. Personally, I think that what we've got to do is back up that and start moving to the sorts of systems that city government had way back in the old time. So,
all right.
You can put Troy on here. I'll put this stuff through to him.
All right. Thank you, Ken. And I think, Ken's point about getting people out on the street, and that echoes what Councilmember Gautier was talking about in terms of outreach workers. As a former outreach worker myself, I believe in that idea because I think engaging people in conversation, having a physical attentive presence on streets can be really helpful. But we also need people from the communities themselves to be part of that effort, because it's sometimes it doesn't work when you have people from other communities coming into the streets of your community. All right, so let's go to Barbara in West Philly.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I wanted to know if you are aware of or know anything about any maps that show where all of the agencies who are being paid now at this time to do work in violence prevention, where their work is located, or what area they're covering, and exactly what they're doing in those areas. Because that's one thing I wondered about. Well, what about evaluating the programs, and what is that process like?
I don't know of a single source that would have that information. Perhaps the mayor's office has something like that, but I'm not aware of it. But I think your point is, relates to what Councilmember Gautier was saying, is that there are a certain number, I think she said 14 zip codes where the gun violence is the worst. Mm-hmm. And those are the places where resources and organizational work should be concentrated.
And I think we need to find out what is going on right now and how those programs are evaluated, Mm-hmm. And what has their success, if you will, rate has been, and or not, and what are they seeing as the challenges? You know.
Mm-hmm.
I just I haven't heard that discussion, and maybe I'm just not aware.
No, I think your lack of awareness matches many people's lack of awareness, because I don't know that enough is happening to actually communicate to the public what efforts are being made, how they're doing, what is effective, what is not effective. And I think this is a community interest we all want to know, because our information basically comes after the fact. After there's a shooting, we hear about it. And then we get concerned. Our concern is piqued yet again. And we wonder, well, what is being done to improve the situation? How might I help? How could I make a contribution? Or, what is being effective? We all have an interest. And I think that interest is not being met with the information that we would need.
I agree. I definitely agree. Yeah, someone has to have the information, but it's not, being shared.
Well, I'm going to, in the future, I'm going to try to pinpoint, who might be best to speak to this from the mayor's office to inform the public about what actually is happening and what is successful, what is not successful.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Barbara. Appreciate you. All right. We are up on our final break before the end of the show. You are listening to Solutions with Amani Braxton. We'll be right back.
AARP is working to protect Americans 50 plus by making sure you have the latest information about the COVID-19 vaccines and the distribution plans in Pennsylvania. Just visit aarp.org/PA vaccine to learn who's eligible for the COVID-19 vaccine, when, where, and how to get it in Philadelphia and the rest of the Commonwealth, and what you might want to discuss with your doctor. That's aarp.org/PA vaccine.
Philadelphia Families, PHL Pre-K, the city's free quality pre-K program, is growing and now enrolling. Over 160 pre-K centers are ready to serve children this year. There are no income limits for this free pre-K program. Children who are 3 or 4 years old as of September 1 can enroll. Call 844-PHL-PRE-K or visit phlprek.org to learn more and find a quality pre-K center. That's 844-745-7735. This program is made possible by the Philadelphia Beverage Tax.
What is dedication?
My daughter started making necklaces. She makes what we call affirmation fashion. I tell her every day that your black is beautiful. Your black is beautiful. And if there's anything better than being beautiful, it's being smart. If there's anything better than being smart, it's being kind. And reaffirming that every day is our method of making sure her chin never drops. My dad wasn't around, and I remember riding a bike and falling off and cutting myself, and me never just wanting to get back on it. People ask, how your children learn how to ride a bike, and you didn't. I didn't teach them. I just created an environment where they taught themselves, and all I had to do was be there.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
The WURD Radio Newsletter, keeping you informed, engaged, and connected. Sign up by visiting wordradio.com. Scroll to the bottom of the page and type your email address under Connect with Us. You'll receive the latest information on WURD Radio, messages from our president and CEO, Sarah Lomax-Reese, exclusive articles and multimedia content, and resources. Stay informed with the WURD Radio Newsletter. You're listening to Solutions exclusively on WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD.
Welcome back to Solutions. This is Amani Braxton. Some great conversation tonight. I appreciate all the callers. I also want to shout out some of the folks I see on the Facebook Live feed making some comments. Tania Stevens said, the city has teenage hitmen. The murders are being committed by our children aged 15 to 25. We have failed a generation. God help us. And, you know, that comment, thank you, Tania, for commenting. And, you know, that makes me think of the comment that Kempis, or the proverb that Kempis Songster shared when he was on the show a couple weeks ago. He talked about the African proverb, everybody knows it takes a village to raise a child, but then he referred to another proverb that goes something like, if we isolate our children, they will burn down the village in order to feel some warmth. He said it better than I, but you get the mess, you get the point of it. We have to re-embrace our own children. Also, I want to shout out Leslie Cook, who's on here. Gary Butler Sr. said, I guess in response to my comment about my neighbor who wasn't eligible for rental assistance because their landlord couldn't produce the deed with their name on it, the landlord's name on it. Gary says, if that landlord can't produce a deed, he is not the landlord. I wouldn't be paying him or her. I think that's a great point. So I think, you know, one of the things I wanted to also mention, there's an update I wanted to share related to the MOVE children, or the younger generation of MOVE, who we spoke about a couple weeks ago, who had come out and put out a statement talking about MOVE as a cult-like organization that engaged in abusive behavior with its members and with its children in particular. A few more MOVE supporters and former members have signed on to that statement now. That's just the latest on that, so I wanted to share that update. The other thing I wanted to do is just to share some of my picks from Black Star Film Festival for the last 2 days of the festival, which are tomorrow and Sunday. And, you know, I didn't get to mention last week the passing of Ione Nash, who was a Philadelphia dance legend, Philly African dance pioneer, who passed, I think, about a week or so ago, maybe 2 weeks ago now. But that, I thought of her when I saw on the schedule for Black Star. There is, tomorrow at 10 a.m., there is a screening of a film called Uprooted, the journey of jazz dance, that looks into, for all the dancers out there, that looks into the history of jazz dance as a particular art form coming out of the Black community and the Black, it's kind of like a Black genre in the professional dance world, and the history and where it's going. So for all of you dancers, that will be an interesting one as well. There's also, in the afternoon at 2 o'clock, there's a documentary that I've been hearing about for quite a while called Writing with Fire. That is a documentary about India's only newspaper run by Dalit women who are considered one of the lowest castes. And they are amazing reporters on the front lines of India's biggest issues, and they're talking about what's happening to lower caste people in India. So that's also one of the films featured. And then at 8 o'clock tomorrow, there's an outdoor screening of a documentary about Rick James, which is sure to be quite interesting. It is called Bitchin', The Sound and Fury of Rick James. And I believe that is going to be at the outdoor plaza in front of the Philadelphia Museum of Art, featuring the large Washington Monument fountain. So that will be tomorrow at 8 o'clock. So there's that one. And there's so much more. And if you go to blackstarfest.org, you can check out the schedule. There's a nice there's a film about Algeria, and there's also a number of conversations with filmmakers And most of this you can stream. So I encourage you to check that out. So as we get to the end here, if you have any more comments on the gun violence situation, as well as I'm very curious to know what your insights are into why there is still vaccine hesitancy, and why there's certain communities in our city that we have such low rates of vaccination, I would really be curious to hear. So let's go to Diane in South Philly.
Good evening, Ms. Braston.
Good evening.
Thank you for taking my call. I want to talk about the gun violence. You know, Mr. Tyrone asked a question, and my answer, you know, it don't have to be. I don't know if the right answer, but a lot of times, hurt people hurt people. When you say hurt, can you hear me?
Yes, now I can.
Okay. I want to speak about the gun violence and the question Brother Tyrone asked. And my answer is that hurt people hurt people. And you look at these young children, you know, they a lot of them coming up, they did not have no love poured into them. And sometimes when you don't have love poured into you by your parents, your community, you know, you tend to do crazy things, you know. So I think that's the problem. But in my neighborhood, I'm disabled, but what I do, I talk to young men, and a lot of them didn't have jobs. I talk to them how important it is to have a job. Get up in the morning, and so you could go to work and take care of yourself. Or if you have children, take care of your children. And 10 guys that I talked to in my neighborhood, they all got jobs. So I think if it's a part that we all can help. We can just, reach one, teach one. We all got to get involved to help our children. Because, you know, it used to be a village. We have to get back to that village again. And I think once we get back to that village, helping our young people, when you walk past them, say something to them. Don't be mean to them. Talk to them, you know. And I think things, you know, things will get a little better. I know it's more things we have to do, but sometimes it's a little thing that you do make a difference.
I think you're absolutely right. And that's what I was referring to earlier as well, in terms of the underlying issues, underlying conditions that some of these young people are facing that leads them down a wrong path. And I think, you know, lack of love is a big one. Lack of mentorship, lack of guidance, you know, lack of, you know, adults need to be patient with young people. If they mess up, or if they show an attitude or act negatively, we actually have to give them the space and be patient and provide, you know, the unconditional presence and attention and care and love, regardless, because that sends them a message of that they're accepted no matter who they are.
That's right. That's right. Thank you so much for taking my call.
Thank you for what you're doing, just as a community member and as somebody who just is that loving, steady presence. That means so much more than we often recognize. So thank you for doing that.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye. All right. So I'm going to share one more time the information for rental assistance, and I will also post it in our Facebook Live feed. It's phlrentassist.org, phlrentassist.org. And there's also phillytenant.org, phillytenant.org. And then finally, the hotline number is 267-443-2500, 267-443-2500. I want to give a shout out to all the folks who called in, and I know many of you who take the time to call in are also people who, like Diane, is a presence in your community, and who is talking to the young people in the community, who's trying to be a presence, a caring presence. So Diane can Mr. Tyrone, Mr. Maurice. I hope that I'm not missing anybody else. A number of people have called in, and I really appreciate you and your comments on this show and on the air, but also what you do out in the community. In addition, all of those people who are on Facebook Live and following us on Twitch TV, appreciate you. Thank you, Troy, for holding it down, having my back, as always, and for your technical expertise. Always appreciate it.
I'm your
and I'd also like to thank Councilmember Jamie Gauthier, as well as Rashida Phillips of Community Legal Services. So the Envy McKee Show is up next, and we will see you next week. Peace.